from Yes. We've got Vicky from Michigan. We've got Ahmad from Indonesia. We've got Lauren from Austin. Very cool, Lauren. We've got Hassan from Pakistan. That's awesome. And then we've got Victoria from Barcelona. Cool. All right. So I think we can get started. So I've known Ali for probably about a year approximately. He ended up speaking. He actually was one of the first keynote speakers at Running Remote in Montreal, Canada. And the reason why I really like Ali and Juno is there are very few companies that actually are able to truly give you the dollars and cents on how to actually think about an employee wellness program and how to be able to deploy it. But because Ali is focused on just employee wellness in general, as opposed to this being a specific HR vertical inside of your organization, he can give you data and he can give you help that I think no other company can really give you. And I've been looking at his platform. I mean, the thing is absolutely amazing. We use quite a lot of the services that Juno has inside of their system. And to me, I think that this is really a critical piece of the remote work stack moving forward. So I'm excited to be able to see where Juno goes. And then I'm also really excited to see where Ali goes running Juno, because to me, when we had around March of 2020, when everything changed inside of remote work, I remember actually writing down on a piece of paper all of the things that we needed to do inside of the remote technology stack. An employee wellness portal was actually one of those things. And a buddy of mine, we were like, oh man, maybe we should sit down and build some of these things. And we never did any of them, but now they're all magically popping up. And Juno is one of the leaders in that space, which is incredibly exciting. So I'd love to be able to bring you on, Ali, if you can pop on and you can introduce yourself. Hey, Ali, how are you?
Hello, everyone. I just saw someone in the chat is in Barcelona, as am I, calling in from humid and warm Barcelona. Great to join, and thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm very excited to be able to jump into this talk. I think that very few, as I'd said before, companies are actually able to quantify employee well-being. So I'm very excited about what we're going to be able to talk about today, because I know that this has actually been a hot debate literally in like HR conversations that I've had with my team. So I'm excited to be able to get into it. Is there anything that you need before you jump into the presentation?
No, all good, all good. Any questions that you have, of course, put them in the chat, and Liam is going to be kind enough to ask. If we have time, I'll try my best to keep within the time that we have allotted, but I look forward to hearing your questions and hopefully answering them.
All right, guys.
Thanks very much.
Good luck, Ali. And again, if you have any questions, put them in the chat as quickly as possible so that we can actually, Ali won't get to them right away. I'll pop back up and then we can get through all of the questions after the fact. See you later.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's great to see everybody, and thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it. I'm seeing a lot of different countries, so I hope that no one is suffering too much from any time zone. I hope no one is calling in from 4 a.m. But if you are, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. So, of course, what we're talking about today is something that usually is the bane of PR, of HR people around the world, which is how do we actually measure this very ethereal topic of employee well-being? Now, before we kind of get into it, I want to introduce myself, and I am the founder and CEO of Juno. Juno is a global employee well-being brand. We are powering the lives of over 7,000 people in now actually 70 countries worldwide. And you know what? The story of Juno is I'd worked in a variety of tech companies before starting the company. I felt as though I was, unsupported, or at least undersupported by very well-meaning companies, because the tools and the software and the programs that were on offer just didn't really work. And so what we do is we give employees choice and flexibility. We allow them to kind of define what well-being means to them. And we're very popular amongst remote teams because we're the only borderless platform in the world. So what are we going to cover today? So look, first of all, let's talk about why employee well-being. Why is it important? Why is it something that every company should be thinking about? Let's also look a little bit at the history, so understand why has it been so difficult to quantify? Why is the ROI so difficult? And that's actually been the bridger of the, let's say, the bottleneck or the friction point between a company really going full in on employee well-being, because it's difficult to quantify the benefit. And also how we can finally quantify the benefits today. I put some data and some metrics that are kind of global, but I'll also talk you through some of what we've found, which is quite eye-opening, really. And then kind of give you an idea of what you can do to improve. For those of you that have the ability, I can see some people, experience managers and heads of people here, on how you can do better. And I'm sure you're already doing a lot, because if you weren't part of this community, I'm sure you should be and you would be. But any kind of ideas that we have for you to improve. So let's talk about why it's important to prioritize employee well-being, why it's important to get this right. So first and foremost, the jury is in, and the advantage of actually getting this right and having a good employee well-being in your workplace is now backed by research. It's not, it would be nice to have this. It is actually backed by various peer-reviewed studies, a lot of research that proves that actually happier, healthier employees are more productive, they are better for business, they are definitely more retained, and the cost implications for the businesses are astronomical. Following on from that, I'm sure those of you that are recruiting know that employer branding is just so important. It's always been important, but right now I think it's more important than ever. What does that mean? That means being appealing to a candidate, having great Glassdoor reviews, having a really clear careers page on your site to show people what is it going to be like to work for my company. And then the final is modern candidate expectations. People who look for jobs now, people who work in jobs now, have different sets of expectations. That's a societal thing. They expect to work in environments that are not toxic or promoting burnout. So that's why we should care in the first instance about employee well-being. So a little bit about the numbers. I mentioned that getting this right is backed by research. So we actually ran 2 studies last year, and I've kind of put some of the information here as well as some other studies and other data. And it's pretty damning on the side of the negatives, let's say. So over 3/4 of professionals or white-collar workers said that they would consider quitting their jobs because they didn't like where they worked. They felt overworked. They felt as though they were stressed. They felt like they were burning out, and that their companies weren't doing enough to combat this. Now, understandably, COVID and the pandemic and remote working has definitely meant that there have been a lot of benefits, but actually here you see that 70% of workers find the new ways of working, which you could say are remote working or hybrid working, this blurring of work-life balance and this new work-life blend, that has become a significant form of stress in people's lives. So 70% of workers find that to be a significant source of stress. So what does those 2 metrics tell us? Is that as an organization, as an employer, looking after your employees in ways that combat burnout, that improve people's work-life balance, and also to kind of consider the way that people are working, will improve your retention, all right? And it will improve people's productivity, because as you can tell, people are willing to walk away. They're willing and ready to just say, I'm not working here, this is not good for me, and to walk away. Now, on the positive side, and of course there are many, but I just picked out 2 important metrics. So there's a hero poll. This is an acronym. I can't remember what it was, like health. employment. I can't remember, but if you look up Hero Poll and employee happiness, what they found is that there's on average, 25% increase in productivity for those healthier, happier employees. And I think that when you look at it, it's pretty obvious, right? People who feel energetic, they feel valued, they feel happy, they feel well, they're healthy, they have a healthy relationship with their work, of course, are going to be more productive. And it's good to see that that's been kind of backed by a survey, and it was a pretty wide ranging one. And our numbers for the census-wide poll, by the way, is we interviewed 5,000 professionals in the UK, and the AP poll was slightly larger than that. Now, coming onto that, actually, we found that they're happy and healthy employees are actually 2 times more likely to stay in their jobs. Kind of an obvious one too. People that work in environments that they feel, again, valued, happy, healthy, and also rely on their, a lot of the people now, especially with the cost of living, rely on their employers to cover things like their gym, health insurance, their cycle to work schemes. Employers are actually making it a lot more affordable or even free for employees to advocate and have a healthier lifestyle, including things like lunch subsidies and so on. And so, of course, those happier, healthier employees are twice as likely to stay in their jobs than unhappy ones. So just those metrics alone, aside from, of course, it's the right thing to do to care about employee well-being, aside from, it makes business sense, these are the numbers that back why we should care about employee well-being. Now, moving on from that, we talk about employer branding. So this is another reason why we should care. If you Google Gen Z workforce, you're going to get a ton of news articles and research papers and surveys. But actually, Gen Z, they are the I wouldn't say straw man, but they're definitely the focal point that really kind of illustrates a general point about the whole 5 generations in the workforce, which is that people want to work for companies that have missions. They're driven by ethics, by sustainability. I remember, 15 years ago when I first did my first ever kind of like work experience internship. I worked for a company that did research on corporate social responsibility. So I was tasked with trawling the websites of lots and lots of Fortune 500 companies to understand what they were doing for corporate social responsibility. Now, at the time, and that was 2006, 2007, they were really it was a footnote. It was like a link in a footer. CSR, we plant trees. And in a similar way, that's kind of where we're at now with well-being, because now corporate social responsibility, sustainability, eco-friendliness, carbon footprint, and so on, that's like the cornerstone of people's businesses now. So 15 years later, we see this evolution where it was kind of relegated to the footer link of a website. Now, you have sustainability officers, you have, huge companies like Procter & Gamble changing the way that they do business because of that. And I feel like we're seeing the same thing with employee well-being. So to be ahead of the curve, we see 3 out of 4 workers, they're saying, I want to work for an ethical business. I'm sure many of you, when you interview, and I do too, see people saying, look, I just want to work for a company that is doing good for the world. And that doesn't just mean for the world, but for their employees. And as well, 80% of candidates are searching for reviews on Glassdoor. God knows I used to, and I know that people ask us about ours as well. So that's why your employee value proposition is super important. Most of our clients will create a whole page about what it's like to work at Stewart, what it's like to work at Oyster HR, to see essentially, look, we care and we're a company worth working for. And finally, why do we want to care about employee well-being? It's what do people expect these days? This is why it's important. And actually, again, we come back to it, the focal point of Gen Z. But again, Gen Z is really just a sample size of a trend that is across all the generations. It's not just the 20-year-olds, it's everybody. People prioritize employee well-being when they're looking at jobs. They prioritize, okay, I want to work hard. I want to work on something that's mission driven. I want to work in a rocket ship, but I want to have a work-life balance. I'm not going to work 16 hours a day. I want companies that prioritize my health and happiness. I want to make sure that I'm not going to be in a toxic environment. And I want to make sure that I'm not burnt out. Those are things that for the first time maybe in the post-industrialized era, we have people that just walk away from jobs and they say, look, doesn't seem like you guys care about workers. From my candidate experience and also from working here, I'm not happy and I'm walking away. And so companies that don't prioritize this and don't care about this get left in the dust. So why doesn't everyone get it right? Why doesn't everybody just nail employee well-being? And I think the reason, and there's a piece of data that I can share after this, which was run by CIPD, which is the British HR Association. Now, the CIPD found that 70% of HR leaders found that the unquantifiableness, if that's even a word, the difficulty of quantifying the benefits of investment in well-being was one of the bottlenecks. But also, it's once they did implement something, it was measuring the effectiveness of those programs. For example, and this is something that we've avoided, right? As a company that tries to improve well-being, they tend to focus on one or two, let's call them vanity metrics. So it will just say, they'll give lagging indicators. So they'll say, companies that invest every dollar in well-being get $4 back in productivity, right? But that's kind of a very difficult thing to wrap your head around, right? Then you also have things like less absence days. Oh, well, companies that invest in well-being see 70% less absence days. Again, kind of difficult to wrap your head around. And interpreting that, you can't just, you can't link that just to a well-being program. There are things like the business health, what's going on in the market, how ethical is leadership, how much work do you have? These are all things that make this employee well-being thing difficult to manage. But moreover, and this is what we believe in our mission at Juno, is that truly well-being is undefinable. What is well-being? Well-being to Rachel could be, getting a run in after work. But well-being to Liam might be getting an organic food box delivered, or it might even be, connecting with his community. There isn't really a sort of cut and paste well-being. And that's why, for us, we just open that definition up and we let employees pick and choose what they want. But that's why it's been so hard to quantify the benefits of employee well-being. Now, however, we're in a stage now where we can quantify the benefits of employee well-being. Now, the data around this is still immature globally. In our case, and I'll share with you some of our utilization metrics, and I'll give you some anecdotes as well. But ultimately, there are definitely metrics that you can use in your organization to kind of quantify, is every dollar that we're putting into our employee benefits, let's say, or employee well-being, is that getting us what we want out of it? Is it a sunk cost? Could there be a cheaper way to do it? Because of course, we're all businesses and we have burn rates. And so what we found is the ones that are the most reliable are actually the ones that are probably the least sophisticated. The ones that tell you the strongest story about how well your employee well-being is doing are the ones that don't require a PhD in machine learning or statistics. The first one is talking to your people, is using, whether it's pulse surveys, we use pulse surveys ourselves, whether it's simple one-to-ones, it could be in any format. But there are questions, and we'll come to this, that you can ask your team, to ask them about their work-life balance, to ask them about, in general, right? What is it that you find? And I'll come to that, exactly what kind of questions you can ask to quantify that, as well as your ENPS, your employee net promoter score. Now, this isn't, again, I come back to it, I was thinking before this, can we bring in some kind of really, really incredibly sophisticated statistics or data point and kind of show you that there's this kind of like this formula that you can use to understand every dollar that comes in and what kind of metrics. But really, we've done the research ourselves for the last 4 years. These are the actual reliable metrics that you can use in your organization. The next one is the actual approval rate of your wellbeing program. Most of our clients come to us because nobody used what they had before. So, for example, they offer them couponing, or they offer them lunch vouchers, or they offer them a reimbursements, or they offer them some kind of expense program. Maybe they say, hey, everyone gets a headspace. And they get frustrated. The CEOs, the managing directors, or the HR, they come to us and they say, we tried everything, or we tried a few things, not everything. People didn't use it. We want something that people will use, that people will value, that people will find tailored to them. And that is generally the hurdle that you have to cross. So the approval rating, do people actually like what you're offering? And then, of course, being that we know that productivity will increase, does your performance versus plan in your company, is that aligned? And how are your OKRs tracking? And that, I find, is kind of the last thing that you would track. So some ideas, right? Some ways that you can think about employee surveys. The first one is, how stressed do you feel? We ask our team this on a scale of 1 to 10. How are you rating your workload? And we let people go over the scale, right? Which really tells us a lot. How do you relax? And what worries you most at work right now? I find that when that last question, very often, especially because we're fully remote, is I have too much stuff to do and I don't know if I can prioritize all of it. I don't know if I can organize myself. That tells us that our employee well-being could be better. And by the way, as an employee well-being company, we don't get it right every time. That's for sure. So employee surveys, vital, not very sophisticated, but those are some of the questions. And I'll share this afterwards to quantify. Now, it's very important. I put here, what you want to also watch out for is any serious fluctuations in your data, in the quantification of this. You want to see that there is a general trend and no spikes. Spikes indicate that you have a pretty shaky employee well-being, because something could come up and people's well-being goes out the window because of a project, for example. Every task becomes the first priority. Oh God, I know that. So approval, we talked about this, right? It's pretty obvious. Are people using what you're offering? What's the quarterly utilization rate? So for us, it's like 65% of employees use Juno every quarter, which is still lower than we'd like it to be, but it's higher than the average in the market by a lot. Are people making use of what you're spending money on? Would they be disappointed if you took it away? So we ask that straight up in a survey. Hey, if we took this away, what would you be disappointed? We want to see, do they feel like there's a loss? And that is also, by the way, a very good indicator of whether or not this is a retention tool. Are they going to leave? Or is this keeping them? Is this one of the things that's keeping them in the job? And how are they using it currently? So I'll give you some numbers on how employees use Juno, right? Now, Juno, again, marketplace, we have thousands of different products and services. The number one thing that people spend their points on is food. Now, to be fair, it's not like massively bigger than others, but it's food. People love grabbing delivery of organic food, or they like using their local delivery service. But it really kind of stunned a lot of our employers, because they realized that, wow, we were kind of giving this cookie cutter approach. We were kind of telling people, hey, use the gym. But the truth is, they were really surprised. People were using it on food. They were using it on childcare. They were using it on their Peloton memberships and so on. So there was a real surprise. And I think that that's kind of one of the questions you want to ask as well. And finally, and I think this is for us, the last thing that you measure, but really kind of seals whether your employee well-being program is working, is being that we know that happier, healthier employees are more productive. Where is that productivity? And so how are you tracking performance versus plan? In our mind, it's, we projected something over the year. We have this roadmap. How are we projecting? Are people tracking their deadlines. Are they hitting their deadlines, or are they missing their deadlines? When you speak to them, hey, this deadline wasn't hit. Why? I was overworked. I didn't have time. I was stressed. I couldn't work on it. I've got stuff going on. That is another final kind of productivity metric there. Now, I'm running through this because we're kind of running a little bit behind, and I have a few more slides to go. But like I said, and I'm going to show you some of our metrics, but like I said, this is really not that scientific. I mean, and the reason is you could come out with, for example, I could tell you to track, I could tell you to track your absence days. I could tell you to track your survey software versus the amount of pounds that you spend. But this is really the most effective and most reliable set of metrics. So when a company gets employee well-being right, and we feel like when they use Juno for a long time, they're getting employee well-being right, we find that they have a much higher Glassdoor review score. And we did a survey of 45 of our companies versus 45 non-Juno users, and we found that job satisfaction, loyalty, performance, and engagement scores were far higher than the scores across the rest of the market. Now, again, I'm not going to put that just down to Juno, of course. It all kind of comes down in a package. But as you can see, they have a stronger employee value proposition, and their Glassdoor reviews are much higher. Now, whenever a company joins Juno, they do an eNPS. So they'll run a pulse survey, which will essentially get them, their eNPS, their employee net promoter score, and we check every 3 months. And over 3 months, we saw an 18% increase, right? Which is a massive increase. Again, I'm not going to say it's all down to Juno, but this is what we see with those 45 companies. And in fact, we're doing this rolling, so it kind of constantly rolls, and we're always getting that data. And what employees have to say about it, this is just a selection, right? So just a small selection of what employees themselves are saying, right? And this is when employees can really show you that their lives are improving and that their employee well-being is improving as a result. So this is a guy from Oyster who decided to go skydiving, and then he followed it up with a wing walk, which I don't know if anyone has YouTube searched that, but sounds terrifying. But that's his idea of well-being. That picture on the right, and then someone on the left just grabbing themselves flowers. So productivity when it's sunny, are you up or are you down? And they got those flowers through Juno Points. So finally, what can companies do to improve their employee well-being? Firstly, like I said, it is really just about speaking to your employees openly, understanding, okay, what are you valuing right now? How is your workload going? And tracking that diligently, tracking that, whether it's you using your ePulse software, we use Engage With, which is pretty good. It's a Slack-enabled product. Others use, there are so many out there. But speaking to your employees openly, whether it's, through this data software or just verbally, but making sure you track it and asking those questions that are not very newfangled, they're not that sophisticated, but they are reliable. The second thing is giving your team the freedom to make their own decisions. So allowing them to define what well-being is to them, being that we know well-being is undefinable. And then the final thing is making sure that you're measuring the right things. So in summary, we are 1 minute over, or just about. Employee well-being should be every company's priority. We've seen it, right? It is something that no company should just ignore. Now, it's not been easy to quantify in the past. There have been a lot of different metrics and numbers, and it's not been easy. But now, using employee satisfaction, approval of the well-being program, and productivity metrics, specific ones, to quantify what you're doing is working, you can really see the difference. Okay, we could talk about this for 4 hours, but I packed it into 30 minutes. Any questions? I need to go and grab my charger. Hold on. Okay, Alex O'Brien asks if you had to. Oh yeah, Liam, do you wanna take over the questions?
Yeah, if you would allow that,
Of
that would be
course,
fantastic.
of course.
This was I actually, hopefully I don't freak you out, but I grabbed like 8 screenshots
Okay,
throughout the
I'll,
presentation.
I'll share the
Very, very
presentation.
interesting stuff. All right, so questions in the chat. And the first one that we have right off the top is Alex, which is the COO at Spotlight. Um, Real interesting question for you, Alex. Would you like to come up and ask your question? If you would, there is a interesting way for you to be able to do that. You simply just ask for that capability, and then we can pop you up there. And if not, that's totally fine too. Oh, it looks like maybe we are ask to speak button is the actual button that you can use. Again, this is a completely new platform for us. It's pretty cool, but we're trying to figure out all the new aspects for it. It's in the top right corner of your screen. And if not, Alex, I'll ask your question for you because sometimes people are a little shy. All right, so Alex has got this question. And for anyone else that's asking a question too, if you want to be able to come up on screen and ask your question directly at Ali, just let us know because we want as much interaction as humanly possible. All right, so if you had, and Alex said he's on the move, so we can't do it. So no apologies, he'll do it next time. If you had to point to one concrete thing that you can use to sell in an employee well-being solution to an HR team or to a CEO. It's very interesting that the COO is asking this question. How to sell it to the CEO effectively. What is the most tangible out of the list? It seems like everything you mentioned is still a blend of other possible factors. Do you think this is more about building a picture of its impact?
Yeah, so it depends on what the employee well-being solution you're talking about really is. I mean, ultimately, what I can just answer to what Juno is. So Juno is basically your one hub for everything. So
Right.
our pitch is very simple, which is why would you not do it this way, considering it's the most efficient, right? It just makes sense. So, for example, you pick a budget, you give it to your staff, you let them decide what makes them happy. You don't really have to worry about it. You get the usage metrics back. You get little, account manager helping you with other initiatives and things like that. But it really depends on what you're looking to do. I mean, from our perspective, uh, again, it depends on your goals and it depends on what it is that you're trying to. If you're trying to improve mental health, for example, but for us, it's hey, previously you might go to one provider which does a gym or does lunch, and you want to hope that the money that you spend means everyone uses it, but it's pretty much impossible, right? It's pretty much impossible for us for everyone to go and use that gym and use it enough for the money to make sense. So we say democratize the spend, save yourself the hassle, give it to everybody. If it's not spent, it stays there. It just makes common sense. But again, yeah, of course, there's picture building here. It's about like, do you want to show that you care, or are you just going after tick boxing? Is there a picture you're just trying to build? Yeah, of course, we want to build a vision of what you could do if you made a really fantastic well-being program.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I think one other question that I would have connected to that is you're the COO or you're the director of remote or you're the director of HR. What do you think is the most convincing way to sell a well-being program to the CEO who's really looking at the dollars and cents here? And that's kind of, I mean, in a part what we talked about before, but I think that's because that's the decision maker that really probably a lot of people need to get through, right? You get your internal advocate at Juno, which is like, I understand the ROI of the well-being program. I'm convinced of it. But then when you go to the CEO, it's like, all right, so I spend 250,000 on employee well-being, or I hire 2 more engineers. Right? And it's like they're trying to constantly work out that variable. Do you have any of your clients that really have a good pitch or a good kind of way of getting that across the line with them?
Think about it as a percentage of their total remuneration. So £45 in, let's call it dollars, $45 a month on average is what people spend on their employee well-being on Juno.
Okay.
Now, it varies. By the way, remote teams tend to spend a lot more. So remote teams can spend up to $250 a month. That's just that's their kind of their choice right there. But most companies spend between 30 and 50. And the average right now, because of those remote teams, is 45. 45 is like an infinitesimally small fraction of their salary, but it almost supercharges, right? Supercharges their retention, supercharges your productivity for that person. Also, by the way, and this has been proven time and time again, it beats a salary hike. So if you were to offer somebody $800 a month in let's not say 800, let's say $100 a month in extra cash versus $50 a month in cash that they can spend but towards subsidized well-being, whether it's their lifestyle, like their gym or their commute, they'll pick the $50.
Wow. Well, that's the sell right there then. That's the sell directly to the CEO. It's like, oh, I can lower my costs to increase retention. That's all that we're doing here.
Use Juno right now to give bonuses instead of cash. Like they can't afford to give cash, so they're just like, hey, let me give you basically $100 worth of buying power, because they're buying the same stuff if they went and bought it. But when I say buy, I mean like they're getting therapy, they're getting a massage, they're getting coaching. These things would have cost, maybe they wouldn't even bought them, right?
Right.
But they're getting it now, and as a reward for their sales instead of just cash commissions. And it saves the company on tax and nonsense like that.
We've got another question here from Lauren, who is the Senior Director of Creative and Marketing at something or other. Lauren, would you like to be able to come up and ask your question? If not, I'm very happy to ask the question on your behalf. And I'll give you 3 seconds to be able to answer on that one. One other point that actually just really hit home for me, about 1.5 years ago, I was interviewing for a head of marketing. And this person was from the Philippines. And their response was, I see that you have 20 Filipinos in your organization, but I don't see any Filipinos in your executive inside of the org chart of the company. And that's a major red flag for me. And I don't think I want to work for you. And I was like, whoa, okay. That was a real, I had never experienced the exact Glassdoor research feedback loop coming to me, thinking, oh my God, I'm going to lose this guy. I've gone through like 20 interviews to be able to get to this guy who's amazing. And we lost him because he just was doing his homework more than anyone else. Okay. So Lauren, I'll ask the question on your behalf. So specifically for Juno, I think this is the question that Lauren is referring to. What's the average cost per employee annually? And I guess we got into that a little bit more, but can you speak more to like how Juno is structured in terms of pricing?
Yeah, so we charge a very small per person monthly fee, which you can pay up front for a year, which is like $3 a month. Depends on the plan that you go for, because we have premium that lets you do integrations with your HR systems and amazing stuff as well. And then it's up to you what your allowance and your budget is. So we very strongly suggest $30 a month plus a $360 a year, because we feel like we want to give them, you want to give employees the right amount just to kind of be able to get what they need to get. And by the way, now they can pitch into core benefits, so they can opt to put some money towards health insurance for themselves, or life insurance, or pension. So, we don't want to nickel and dime people. We want them to feel the value. But it is up to you. I mean, it's going to cost you maybe $50 a year just to use it per person. And then the rest is up to you. But we strongly have that kind of suggestion of $30 a month per person.
It's so interesting as well that you talked about how food is the biggest employee perk out of anything else. I mean, that might actually be just kind of a negative commentary on humanity, to be completely honest with you,
Well,
where people are like, go to the gym, get
yeah.
some mental health, get a therapist. No, I want beef jerky and cheese. That's what I would like,
It's
please.
not burgers though. It's so I'll give you the anecdotes, right? So we have on our platform, we have like frozen vegan kits, like meal kits, and we had
Okay,
sent us a really nice, very emotional, but very nice message, which was like, "Hey, I'm a single mother. I work remotely, and I never have a chance to like pop out to the grocery store to like get food for my kids, and it's half term. And through
right.
this, I'm so happy that I could like feed my kids healthy food, not junk, and not have to worry. And you've really taken a load off. So, like to be fair, I just pulled up a document which as well I want to show you,
Yeah,
which is really potentially exciting for the remote gang, which is probably all of you, which is
yeah.
the other thing that we were excited by is this. So, can you see my screen?
You just have to pop it into
Oh,
our
yeah.
view here. There
Oh,
we go.
okay. So, if you can see my screen, I want to show you. See if I can. Is there a picture? No. Okay. So, this is basically a spit out of. Ignore these numbers here. These are like points in and points out. But here you have a spit out of 62 countries and the utilization rates of all of those countries. And it's amazing to see that even in countries as far away as, I mean, I'm from Iraq. Iraq isn't on this
Mhm.
list. It's near Lebanon, 83% utilization. Lithuania, 54%. The lowest one is 38% in Latvia, which is sad. We'll work on that. But this is monthly, right? So you have utilization. No, sorry, it's not monthly. That's not true. It's over 6 months. So
Okay.
35% in Ukraine, the lowest. Um, but
That
still,
would seem to make sense with the
very, very
situation.
good numbers. I mean, what we're seeing is that this is a solution that, I know, for example, for a fact that companies come to us and go, "Oh my God, we don't want to provide Americans with like the best healthcare, the best benefits, the best stuff," and then someone in the Philippines with like nothing, you
Right.
know. Um,
Yeah, to have that equalization is so critical. And I think that just goes back to why I lost that person was we weren't treating each team member as equally as humanly possible. And that's a constant challenge with remote teams.
yeah.
Um, so, all right, let's get into some more questions here that people have. We've got one from Lauren,
Is it the
which
pay?
is, pardon?
So I,
Can you talk more about employees choosing the monthly wellness stipend over a pay increase,
yeah,
looking for data points? Oh, Lauren's actually looking for info for probably for her CEO.
yeah, for
So
sure. So Lauren,
so
I have to dig out a press article that I was in a few months ago that I can share with you. But I just Googled it really quickly, and I've got you an article which is more about benefits. So 80% of employees prefer additional benefits over a pay increase. Um, I'm going to try and find it really quickly because I did a piece and I think it was in the Daily Mail about the cost of living. So, because obviously this is, I'm sure, the same in any country that you're in, but in the UK, which I'm not in, but I'm from, we have a really, really, really intense inflation and cost of living crisis, right? Where
hmm,
people are just unable to afford their bills, heating, gas. It's really, really dire. And so at the time, we did a survey that found that actually companies that provide more benefits in case of a stipend or an allowance that can be spent on their cost of living are actually much better. They could spend $50 a month, let's say, are actually in much better stead than those that don't for their employees who are struggling with that kind of stuff. So I can share with you, Lauren. I'm going to quickly search your name and add you on LinkedIn because I can share with you that article that I can't find right now, but I will find. Um,
okay, cool.
yeah.
Let's just switch to Victoria's question, and then you can get back to Lauren on LinkedIn. What's your experience with companies supporting freelance employee well-being? This is an interesting one because particularly with remote companies, a large segment are freelancers and contractors. It's
Yep.
just the fundamental reality of how that industry exists.
Yep.
What's your do you support that? And if so, what are the theoretical tax implications for doing it?
Yeah, so we do, and we have a lot of people that, for example, give it to their freelancers, but they are very much not a benefit, right? So they cannot be a benefit. You cannot treat contractors as if they're employees. You're full foul of the law,
Mm-hmm.
and every country is different. But essentially, what you want to do is make sure and check with your your local tax um, office. But we have a lot of people that use as a gift. They give it as a gift. They give it to, so for example, we have one company that is a recruiter, and for every candidate that they place in a role, they give them $100 worth of points. Hey, well done,
Perfect.
congratulations, enjoy your new job. And they just do that for the love of doing it. They don't. There's no real rhyme or reason, and then they're not freelancers in that sense. And then for the freelancers, um, they will also do that. Generally, it won't be monthly, so you can
Yeah.
choose to do it as a one-off, and they are careful not to kind of make it part of kind of like some kind of a contract or anything like that.
Right.
Because, for example, we had a contract because we have IR35 in the UK, which I'm sure you know about, which is basically stamping down on people working as contractors when they're really just employees. And we
Mm-hmm.
had a guy that was a contractor for us. I mean, it didn't really count because we're too small, but he couldn't even be in important meeting, like important directorial meetings. He wasn't allowed to be in them because that would mean that he's an employee. Like, yeah. So check with your
Tax layer.
tax lawyers, but generally, yeah, we think it's important, and look, every little helps. Having that little edge, um, especially when you're competing for talent.
And by the way, both me and Ali are not lawyers or accountants, nor do we
Yeah.
play ones on the internet. And none of this should be suggested in any way to be legal advice under any circumstances whatsoever, because I
We
had a
should see
very
how
interesting
you
email
spread out.
3 years ago about that. Yes.
Yeah,
I remember I did one of these and I was like, listen, I think this is what you should do. And then he was like, oh, well, I'm in a lot of shit. And I'm just like, well, that was that was a suggestion. That wasn't advice. Stephen here, who is the president at MDG,
yeah,
has a very interesting counterintuitive question, which is challenging you a little bit. How does Juno make a profit at only $3 a month?
so
What's
three
your
dollars.
what's your point on that one?
Yeah, so $3 per employee per month is the cost, is what we charge for using the platform, like a SaaS fee essentially.
Yeah.
And we make our money because we're a marketplace. We have vendors in place. We have vendors that so for example, whenever you buy a food box, we make commission off of that. We make a little margin off of that, which helps us pay the bills. And of course, we're venture backed, which helps a lot in that we don't have to be necessarily profitable. But yeah, the revenue comes from the seat fees. It also comes from the vendor commission.
I'm also quite sure that with your ability to purchase at scale, you can probably negotiate really good deals with a lot of these vendors that the average company that has 100 employees really can't do. But you could say, I'm Juno. Here's 20. We want to be able to deploy 20,000 system. Let's negotiate. So
Yeah,
even if you guys are taking a little bit of a commission, probably for the individual company, it's a
yeah.
reduction.
Especially now that we're remote. Like I remember when we used to work in offices, like we would just have anything that's like within a square kilometer of the office would give us a discount because we were close. That doesn't exist anymore. So
Hmm.
we're kind of bringing that back, which is like, okay, well, we'll connect you digitally, and then you can jump on a Barry's Bootcamp class online or even in person, and we'll go and collect the employees. Same thing with insurance. Like we have our own policy for health insurance, and we just add you to ours. That's totally above board, and we're essentially acting as the employer. So yeah, absolutely.
Tori's got a question here. Head of people, culture, and something or other. Head of people.
Yeah,
Don't the employees get taxed on their usage?
yeah.
So, it's like a costed benefit. What's your
Yeah.
feedback on that?
So annoyingly, everything is guaranteed in life, including tax. Well, that's one of the guarantees. But essentially, you'll get taxed. Well, it depends, right? You can check with your accountant, but you'll get taxed on the allowance that you give your employees. We'll give you the reports, the P11. If you're in the UK, we'll give you the prepared P11D like form, essentially, that's filled in. You won't pay, they won't pay the tax on the fee. They'll just pay the tax on the allowance. And then we'll pass out any kind of tax-free benefits, which there aren't very many these days, unfortunately. And it's depends on the pay, the pay scale that the person's on, but it'll get taxed at the scale that that person is being paid. So, for example, at £35,000 a year, they'll pay £4 or £5 a month tax for a £40 a month allowance. So it's a few pounds, and we run surveys as well to make sure that employees are on board with that stuff as well. It's annoying. I wish the government didn't do that because it's a blocker, but it is what it is.
Yeah. Tori says, thanks. I have a question about just the breakdown of remote versus in-person for Juno. Do you have that information? Do you know how many of your clients are remote versus in an office? And are you willing to share any of that information?
I don't have the exact number, but I can tell you that we have 1,400 remote workers for sure out of 7,000.
Okay.
And we have people in 62 countries,
Right.
and probably counting. But I can share that. I mean, we are a darling for remote workers. In fact, I think I would say the majority. I don't think we have any clients that are fully in the office every day.
So almost everyone is hybrid to some degree.
But we know that there's 1,400 because there's 3 big clients that I can think of right now that count the 1,400. Right. That are fully remote, nothing. There's no physical footprint.
Okay. So probably at minimum it's 1,400, but probably it's more than that number because you just don't know the in and out data of every worker. That's interesting. And it's so interesting that you said that it's remote workers spend a lot more than in-office workers. And that would make theoretical sense, I suppose, because you're just in an office. So maybe you already get your free coffee or your birthday cake in the office or something like that.
Employees just spend more. Like they prioritize it because they don't have an office to pay for. So the $600 a month per person for the office now becomes $250, and it's like, hey, you can do your work from home, and you can do your well-being and your happiness and your learning and development all through this platform.
Got it. And do you feel, is there also a different type of service that people provide in remote settings? Meaning like in the office, is it all just food, but then remote workers are more like, and I hope that this is better for humanity, more like gyms and therapy? I think probably the best ROI that I could possibly tell anyone to make their lives better is go to the gym and get some therapy. I mean, it's just, at least for me, those are the 2 biggest things that I do not go without. I would actually cut down the quality of my food to be able to continue to go to gym and therapy.
Sure.
Any kind of interesting breakdowns between those 2 groups?
Yeah, so we found, and I can share this with you guys afterwards, is that the remote, so we just recently launched something called Juno Experts. And Juno Experts is basically a digital panel, digital panel of therapists, so in-house therapists, yoga teachers, personal trainers, food coaches, financial coaches, what was the last one? Parenting coaches. Okay. And that was specifically targeted at remote workers because it's difficult for us, for example, to find physical things. I mean, we have a card and we have an expense feature, but to find physical stuff in Lithuania, for example, because there's a few people there, we don't really know the landscape very well. As soon as we launched that, we saw a huge uptake. In fact, we saw about a 15% increase in the category swing from the utilization swing to those Juno experts. So people are, especially the remote Zoom natives, are picking, instead of obviously stuff that's physical or delivered, they're picking, the PT, the therapist. And that's super important for us as well, because we want to make sure that we're always staying true to well-being. I know that well-being is undefinable, but there are some core things that, like you say, working out, speaking to somebody, reducing your stress. We just recently added someone who does mindfulness and breath work.
Okay.
I can definitely share that stuff with you. I mean, I know that, for example, the digital stuff is obviously much more appealing to those remote workers.
For me, I'm very interested. I mean, again, nerding out on your data set would be super interesting, but it would also be interesting to see which employee wellness programs produce the highest ROI towards MPS or EMPS, to be able to actually see like, oh, if someone goes to therapy, their EMPS is nowhere near as high as if you just give them a cheese basket every week. That type of a thing. Like Rachel really likes cheese. She's told me on many occasions.
Oh my God.
Yeah, let me go through. We have a couple more questions here, and I'm realizing I'm falling behind a little bit. Many companies boast great benefits, but they are not that great. How do you provide feedback that their so-called benefits aren't what their team is looking for? And I'm assuming with Juno, you can really, I mean, because it's an open platform, you can choose what you want because you just have like all of these different options. I'd be It'd be very interesting to actually even talk to your suppliers to be able to say like, hey, no one's choosing your cheese basket. Like your cheese sucks.
That's it. I mean, I think also like a lot of companies want to target B2B, and because B2B is such a hard thing to crack, I find that those companies come to us because they're like, well, you're a distribution channel for us, and then actually eventually you can give us insights on what products are the most effective for well-being, for people's happiness and well-being. Like they have disposable income, right? They're given money to spend. So the question is, if money was no object, what would people gravitate towards in their well-being? I think that the best feedback, we first of all, utilization. So we have utilization data that we share with our employers, but also we also give people ready-made template surveys. So sometimes companies will say, hey, you know, we're pretty sure that people don't like it. We want to change. We say, hey, take this template, ask your team. You'll be able to find out. It's very simple questions. It's like, do you know what you have on offer? You know, actually, you realize that they don't. They don't know what everything is on offer. It gets sent in emails. It's kind of, you know what I mean? Like it's very disjointed. It's not in a central place. You know, how often do you use it? So if you use a platform like Perkbox or one of these voucher sites, people don't even log in, you know, and ultimately that's it. You know, there are crazy stories of people saying, "Oh, well, I work for a hybrid company, and our benefit is free lunch in the office and a gym membership near the office. Like, I live 100 miles away." You know, so you know it can be pretty simple, but we give you a template to be like, okay, well, if you're thinking about this, take this, go and find out.
Right.
We'll help you digest that information. But to be truthful, like there's no way that you can make everybody happy with one thing. You have to be able to give them all the choice in the world. And I think that's really key here.
That's great. I know that we're running out of time. If people want to get more information on Juno, what's the best way to be able to connect with you and connect with Juno?
Send me an email, add me on LinkedIn. I just put my email address in the chat. Anyone who's on this call that is interested in learning more, we'll give you an extra special experience and also an extra special deal. So we're running remote.
What is that deal, Ali?
So
you're not telling. You have to sign up to find out.
No, you can talk to me, and I'll have to double check what that is because I can't tell if I don't want to say something and then be like, oh no, it's not that. Okay. We know that you guys get a deal, a extra special deal with us, and email me, and I will be more than happy to talk to you and learn a bit more about. And this has been so fantastic, and I'm excited to meet you.
I think it's when you think about $3 per user per month, and then the data. I mean, the data of just presenting it to the decision maker, the CFO, the COO, the CEO, saying, "Hey, guess what, guys? The economy is bad right now. Inflation is at what 8% in the U.S. Yeah. So there's lots of people that are hurting. So maybe I can't afford to be able to give people an 8% increase just to get them to where they were last year. But what I can do is I can give them a 5% increase. Plus, I could give them Juno that makes up for that cost, and yet my EMPS actually goes up more than it did if I had. I mean, that's a great pitch. One other thing that I have to actually say before we drop off is we actually have this. We were running a digital well-being month, And for 1 month, we ran a challenge on social media where people actually shared their well-being activities. And the winner of this challenge is Carolina Andrzejewskaja, which hopefully I got her name right. She gets a free ticket to Running Remote in Lisbon, and she gets a €100 certificate to the Float Spa in Lisbon, which will be really great. So if you want to join Carolina in Lisbon to be able to get the free spa, go for it. Carolina was the name of one of my ex-girlfriends, so that feels a little weird to me, but I hope that you really enjoy it, Carol, and we will get that to you as quickly as humanly possible. Other than that, again, if anyone's interested in checking out Running Remote, April 25th and 26th in Lisbon, Portugal, we are going to be there, and you'll be able to talk about employee wellness and everything else connected to remote work. And Ali, I really appreciate you coming on. This was incredibly insightful. I actually think the Q&A session was really interesting. I learned a lot about just how to think about to sell this, because it's such, I mean, this is the recurring thing that I get is, well-being, whatever, like, but if you can tell me every dollar I spend here means I have to spend less money, that's such a great pitch to a ton of people that are thinking about doing this.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me again. And it's been a pleasure. And I hope to see you guys all soon. Thank you.
All right. Everybody, take care. We'll see you in the next one. And other than that, Rachel is telling me to wave to everybody and say bye-bye. Bye, everybody.